I have the pleasure of introducing first speaker for today, Dr. Parag. So Dr. Parag, he's currently an assistant professor in mechanical engineering department at IIT Madras, and he did his PhD in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University, and he's published a lot of research journal papers, international journals, and a lot of projects. And I think three things importantly I want to talk about Dr. Parag. One is he's sort of spearheading actively the course called Self-Awareness in IIT Madras. So it's a course which actually dwells on developing the students and individuals, in a holistic manner rather than just coming and getting a degree and going. So they've started this program called Self-Awareness. So he's actively involved in that. And secondly, of course, he's very passionate about energy conservation and social responsibility and so on. But the most important thing is those who have seen IIT campus personally or visited, which is nearby. I mean, if you see the biodiversity around the campus in terms of the flora, fauna, and the environment, he's the person behind that. So he's a very passionate about biodiversity, and he's spearheading a mission on that, on preserving the biodiversity in the campus itself. In fact, a lot of the alumnus actually who have gone from IIT, they come back and say, please don't cut down trees and construct buildings. Try to use the vertical space more than the horizontal space. So that is one thing very specific about Dr. Parag. And today he's going to share his thoughts on Gandhi's ideas on development. And so as an engineer, from engineer to Gandhi, from mechanical to Gandhi's development, very interesting here. Parag, over to you. Thanks for accepting.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, sure. So it's a pleasure to be here. I thank Gopal for that nice introduction. Some of it was undeserved, I think, definitely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so some of the things he said about me are right on top. Okay, is that better? Yeah. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Gopal, for that.
No, yes. Yes, sir.
So thanks to Gopal for that introduction. I think some of the things were undeserved. And I think several of those activities are headed by other people. I am only in the supporting cast. So, but thank you nonetheless. So I'm happy to be here. I thank the K community for this opportunity to interact with all of you this evening. The discussion is going to be titled Gandhiji and the Mansions of the Gods. So it's with apologies to Asterix. There's an episode called Asterix and the Mansions of the Gods. So for those of you who are new to Asterix, the story is basically set in Roman times, fictitious of course, and there's a small village of Gauls which the Romans are not able to conquer. And so in this particular episode, Caesar comes up with the strategy of getting the Gauls to accept the Roman ways. So he says that we're going to set up a Roman settlement near the Gaul village, and then seduce the villagers into accepting the Roman ways. And these mansions of gods are those buildings that they want to bring up in that settlement. And the story is about how the Gauls fight out the battle and how they defeat his schemes. So I thought this was also sort of tied in well with what I wanted to convey today. So it's called Gandhiji and the Mansions of the Gods. So as the introduction has probably made it obvious, my expertise is not in the area of economics or on Gandhian philosophy and things like that. So pardon me if it doesn't meet the standards of academic rigor and things like that. I think there are some experts in the audience also. But nonetheless, I hope there will be something of value that we can all take away from here. And instead of a monologue, we'll go more with a discussion format. So please feel free to interrupt me at any point you feel that you'd like to ask something, so that we can resolve issues as they come up rather than carry it to the end. So Gandhiji, the man and his experiments. No doubt that he was an extremely charismatic person. There's not enough words to capture how charismatic he was and the depth of his philosophy and things like that. So for him, his whole universe was organized around one central principle, and that was the spiritual upliftment of as many people as possible for the whole of mankind. Really, that was his goal, and his economics was subservient to this goal. So to him, economic development was not the primary goal. The primary goal was the upliftment, the greatest possible upliftment for the largest possible mass, and the economics was subservient to this purpose. And according to me, he resurrected India's oldest heritage, which is the pursuit of the highest knowledge. And the wonderful thing about this is that he did this in full public view. He led an active public life, and he was able to pursue this thing of seeking the highest knowledge as he engaged with the real world. And he didn't retreat to a cave where he did penance on one leg for several years. He lived in the real world, and yet he tried to attain this thing. And today this quest has somehow become so far away from us that we find it even hard to relate to Gandhi. In fact, any talk of him often would elicit, the most common thing is elicits his derision, that the old man didn't know what he was talking about, is the sort of thing that happens today. But nonetheless, I think there's much to learn from Gandhiji and his spiritual forebears. And for all the progress that we've made, for all our intellectual achievements, for any serious student of Gandhi, when he reads Gandhi's works, he's astounded by the breadth of Gandhiji's vision, the depth of his introspection, and the clarity of his thoughts. So in that sense, I think there's a lot that Gandhiji has to offer. So there's this quote by Einstein, I think it's from a letter that he wrote to Gandhi, and he says, I believe that Gandhi's views were the most, sorry, this is not from a letter, so this is from a separate thing. I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all political men of our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe evil. So the reason that we don't really appreciate what Gandhi did or what he stood for, the ideas he embodied, I think the reason for this is the following. It is in large part because we have stopped engaging with the central question of life. And to me, that central question is this. The central question is how to live skillfully in a world filled with dukkha. So this sort of is the Buddhist way of putting it. But this is the very thought that has occupied several of the greatest minds that we have seen, from Mahavir, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, Shankara, a host of other wisdom seekers over hundreds of thousands of years. They've asked this question of how to live, how to navigate more skillfully in this world. And that, in a sense, is a central question that all human beings at some point ask in their lives, as to why is life the way it is and what is the best way to live it. And seekers have always found answers. For each person, for each generation, it's a different way. They have to find their own salvation. For each of them, the path could be different. So to me, Gandhiji exemplifies this search, and his experiments, he calls his autobiography Experiments with My Experiments with Truth. And his experiments, he documents his experiments of what he tried and how he overcame several of the problems that he faced on his way. And his story is important as a practical, feasible, everyman approach. It's something that I can relate to. It's not as difficult as what the Buddha said or the Mahavir said or Shankara said. It's something I can actually look at, understand, and connect with far more easily than what some of the other great people have said. And in that sense, we can relate to Gandhi much better. And so this talk is about this idea that Gandhi embodies. It's not so much about the man. Of course, I greatly admire the man, but it's not so much about the man, but it's about this idea that he embodies, that we can pursue this central question, lead an active public life, and bring about great changes without withdrawing from the world and doing things in the real world. So Gandhiji is much closer to us in time, obviously. He's not that far away from us in time as some of the others. And some of the problems that he had to face were very similar to the problems that we are confronted with again today. So there's the one aspect of the whole thing is his quest for perfection, of personal quest. Of course, with Gandhi, there's always the personal quest that he had, where he was looking at. Okay, stay on one side. Okay, thanks. Sure, sorry. So so his personal quest for perfection, that's quite well known to most of us. He stood for non-violence, satyagraha, and things like that, and that's quite well known to most of us. But what is not as well known are his economic ideas, which are mainly confined, per my knowledge, to academic discussions. And I think the mainstream has sort of bypassed his whole philosophy on this, his whole thoughts on this. and it's extremely sad because these ideas have been discarded even without a serious debate on how good they are or how valid they are. And they've been discarded by some of his most trusted followers. For example, Nehru did not buy into this argument. Definitely his son did not buy into his argument, his morality, his preaching of all these things. So some of the closest people to him rejected his ideas, and it didn't find a lot of traction in the real world. But nonetheless, I think there is something that we can look at today and see if he made any sense or not. So before we start looking at Gandhi, one has to look at where we are today, right? As a national goal, one can put this up. Our current national goal is for the whole country to get rich quickly. That would probably summarize what Manmohan Singh would tell him, and some of us may say that this is being generous to Manmohan Singh. It probably is, let a few of us get rich quickly. So, but if we were generous and he said he had, he really intended for the largest masses to get rich quickly. So that's, let's say, that the noblest we can aspire for today, unfortunately, right? But in accepting this paradigm without due caution, we invite the destruction of nature. The delicate living ecosystem is in danger of being destroyed. If we buy into this idea of let's get rich quickly, we stand in risk of destroying this whole thing. And it also we could be trampling on the rights, the basic rights of fellow human beings who may in some ways be less privileged than some others. So it is in this sense that we find similarities between our struggle and the struggle that Gandhiji waged against the problems that he confronted in his time. So our obsession today is what kind of system can create the most wealth. So this is where we are today, and this is from where we are examining what Gandhiji said. So there's a book that Gandhiji wrote. According to me, this is his most important work, much lesser known than some of his other works, and this is called the Hind Swaraj. So the Hind Swaraj has been called a seminal text in the intellectual history of modern India. It's a quote from Makarand Paranjpe. He's a Gandhian scholar who's done a lot of work on this. This book was written in 1908 when Gandhi was on his way on a ship from South Africa to England. Over the space of a few days, he wrote this book in a flash of inspiration. But of course, he'd been thinking about these issues for a long time. Just because he wrote it over a few days didn't mean that he did a hasty job of it. He had been thinking on these issues, and he just wrote it at one stretch. He finished this book, and then he revised it also, and he pretty much didn't change anything when he went back each time and revised. So he defined Swaraj as self-rule or self-control in the book. So it no doubt implied an end to the British rule, but the emphasis was more than on just putting an end to the British rule. So Gandhiji's emphasis was on the self and the development of the highest potential of the self. So he was not so much focused on defeating the other as on conquering the self and enhancing the self. Indeed you could carry this viewpoint further and say that there is no other and no self, and they are all just one and the same thing. And in that sense, true Swaraj is as they say, an all-sided sword. It uplifts one who uses it, uplifts the one who it is used against. So everybody benefits in the process, and everybody wins in the process. So essentially, Swaraj is a struggle against the modern material machine civilization, and it is for a spiritual, rural, agrarian way of life. So this is the key paradigm. This is the two things that are at stake here. One is this modern way of living, and the other is the older, more traditional way of living that Gandhi juxtaposed, and he wanted to examine this more closely. So this is how Gandhi defined Swaraj. He said independence, of course, political independence for the whole of India, including the princely states, French and Portuguese territories. That's of course something we've achieved today already. So the second one is his vision for the economic vision for India. He says each village is a republic with full powers to the panchayat. So the way he envisioned it, each village is self-sufficient. It produces what it needs. It does not have to engage in large-scale trade or commerce with the outside world. It's more or less independent and happy with what what it has. Right? Each individual is free and autonomous but willing to cooperate with others. The society is based on a high degree of self-discipline. It's based on truth and non-violence, and it's a society that's non-hierarchical where everybody is treated equally. And he also cautioned against these things. So long as we fear our own brethren, we are unfit to reach the goal of Swaraj. So that Naxalites is my addition there. So, as long as we fear our own brethren, we are unfit to reach the goal of Swaraj. It is useless to replace the tyranny of English rule with Indian rule. And I take this quote from him straight. It says, if man will only realize that it is unmanly to obey laws that are unjust, no man's tyranny will enslave him. This is the key to self-rule or home rule. So I apologize, you could read it as unmanly, unwomanly, the man can be a woman and things like that. So it's both. So since it was a quote, I didn't want to change anything there, but he meant it that way. So Gandhiji also had a lot of grouses against modern civilization. So I'm building all this background because his economics was only a part of his whole philosophy. He didn't just take it out separately and examine it as a separate unit. It was embedded in his whole way of living and life and everything else. So it was a part of the whole. And therefore to him this question of what is civilization was very important, right? And he had a very low opinion of what passes for modern civilization. So he says a true civilization is that mode of conduct which points out man to the right path. It leads to morality, the mastery over mind and passions, and thus to self-knowledge. So that was his definition of a true civilization. So in that sense, he more or less outright rejected the modern civilization. He said that it's actually an affliction and it needs to be cured. That was in fact very strong statement that he made regarding modern civilization. So of course he has attracted a lot of criticism for his views, and several scholars who think that he was completely off. But nonetheless, it's I think worth looking at what he said in an unprejudiced manner and see if he had some points that we can take away. So these were his objections to the modern notion of what passes for civilization. So here's again a quote. It says, it is my deliberate opinion that India is being ground not under the English heel but that of modern civilization. So he had some very, very strong views. He rejected this notion of parliamentary democracy. In fact, in the book he uses some strong language against the parliamentary democracy. He feels that it's not a system that actually works. The politician in a parliamentary system is not really able to he in fact even refuses to say that a truly patriotic person can serve the function of a good politician in a parliamentary democracy system. He says it's not possible because he's always beholden to the interests of the party above that of the nation, and he's more interested in number games where he can beat the opposition and get things done rather than in looking at what is really good for my country and how should I do it. So in that sense he completely rejects parliamentary democracy, and in fact it's as an alternative to this that he offers the vision of a self-sufficient village which is able to govern itself and does not have to depend on external things too much.
Sorry to interrupt. See, Gandhi, how did he know about parliamentary democracy when India was not having any independence?
This was based on the British model. So he had a lot of experience with the British model, and
there was no party, right?
No, they did have. They do have parties, right? The Labour Party and the Conservatives. So they do have a party system. Yeah. So he had spent a lot of time in the UK also, and he was well aware of this thing, and this was a criticism, in fact, especially of the British Parliament. It was not of the Indian Parliament. This was a criticism of the British Parliament that he said, because at that point, like you pointed out, we didn't have that in place. So this was a criticism of the British Parliament. Right? He was against a life driven by material acquisition. Right? So he felt that anything that's driven by too much of material acquisition actually inhibits or detracts from a real growth, and it's not possible to make real progress if one's life is devoted to material acquisition. He was also against the craze for machinery. He said that overuse of machines is not a healthy thing. Some of it is debatable. I mean, I leave it to you as to how far you think he was justified. But he had strong arguments for why he rejected each of these things. He was against lawyers, although he was a trained lawyer himself. He said, imagine that a stranger by taking our money gives us justice. He was totally against this concept of he said, if there is a disagreement between you and me, we should sort it out by talking to each other and figuring out what is the best way, instead of going to the government or a lawyer and asking them to argue for us, cook up problems, look for technicalities and things like that. He was more of the opinion, yes.
There's one line there that you said he was okay about panchayats.
Yes.
So, wouldn't that also mean a panchayat resolves a problem for you?
Yes, that's true. There could definitely be problems in a panchayat, but if we go back to the original thing that he had, right, he said, right, it's a society that is not hierarchical, right? So I would assume that we have really gone past the barriers of caste and things like that. So this is an ideal situation. He is not saying that this is his vision of what Swaraj for India should look like. It is not saying that we have this and this is already here. He's saying that this is the vision that I have of a place that is non-hierarchical, where everybody is treated equally. And when you have a small village, the possibility that you can address all concerns well are much higher than if the panchayat of Kundangulam was in charge of Kundangulam, it would not have built that nuclear reactor there, right? That's for sure. I mean, if it's bad, good, that's a different question. But the Kundangulam panchayat would probably not have built that nuclear plant there, right?
He represents the panchayat as the village.
As the village, yes. Yes, the entire village that democratically governs itself. So he was not against democracy. He said you govern, local units govern themselves. Right. So he was against lawyers. He was also against doctors, interestingly. He says at one point I myself wanted to become a doctor, but then after some time I realized that this is not really a great profession. And here's what he says, suppose I've indulged in vice. So he gives an example of overeating. I have contracted a disease, a doctor cures me, and the odds are that I shall repeat the vice. So I overeat, I have a stomachache, go to the doctor, pop a pill, and then I'm back again, I again overeat. So in a sense he says that it encourages the weakening of your will, right? You now know that the consequences for your actions are not as severe as they could be. But the second thing I think he raises is far more interesting. He says for the sake of a mistaken care of the human body, they annually kill thousands of animals. I think that number is probably in the millions now, right? We slaughter huge number of animals for medical testing, and I do believe that he has a point there when he says it's for the mistaken care of the human body. He was also against the railways. Again, he makes the argument that there's no point, we are endowed as human beings with legs and hands and with as much mobility as we need. There is no need for us to travel very far, very fast, right? People in India have always been traveling large distances. Shankara traveled all over the country. He walked, or he probably used bullock carts or whatever. He didn't need a train. You can always get by. So you have the time. So we already are endowed with the machinery required to cover as much distance as is required for human beings. So his specific argument against the railways was that it enables it to transport goods from where they are produced. For example, let's say a village is able to produce rice. You're able to transport this rice from this village where there may be a need for rice to another market where it's more lucrative to sell the rice, right? So he was against this sort of the economics. So he feels that the railways were really, so as you can see, most of these things are very radical views. They're not really easily palatable to us, because we've just grown up with this. Most of us love the trains. I love the ride on the train and the sound and all that. It's just beautiful. You see the countryside. But when you realize this, the railways really did contribute a great deal to how efficiently the British were able to control India. Is in part because they had a fantastic rail network, where they were able to move goods and troops and things as they needed to be moved, and they were also able to economically exploit India to the maximum because they had a very good rail system. Of course, I think, yeah, so I'll come back to that maybe a little bit later. So he was against the import of foreign goods. He said it's a waste of money. In fact, he had an even stronger statement he made by reproducing Western style factories in India, instead of money we pay in blood. It will impoverish a great number of people. And those who have amassed wealth out of factories are not likely to be better than other rich men. An Indian Rockefeller is no better than the American Rockefeller, right? And I think he's absolutely right on that count. He goes on to say this: an impoverished India can become free, but it will be hard for any India made rich through immorality to regain its freedom. So very strong statements, and I'm sure some of you disagree with it, and I hope you do also. So we can probably discuss them.
One of the reasons because we are discussing about this after century.
1908.
Yeah, he wrote it in 1908. But many of these things are of current concern too, because again our concern today is how can we get rich and lift as many people out of poverty as possible, and what is the system that will create this. And in that sense, I think so he was against machines. So there's a lot of argument. People said, you're completely stupid, this is the greatest invention of the scientific age is this machines. But his argument was this: what did India do before machines existed? If we cannot make items without machinery, then we make do without those items. Use homemade, handmade articles, support the Swadeshi movement, and attain Swaraj. But I think this quote here, this really says why he was against machines is from this quote here, right? So he's a little extreme here. He says, ideally I would rule out all machinery, even as I would reject this very body which is not helpful to salvation, and seek the absolute liberation of the soul. From that point of view, I would reject all machinery, but the machines will remain, because like the body, they are inevitable. The body itself, as I told you, is the purest piece of mechanism, but if it is a hindrance to the highest flights of the soul, it has to be rejected. So this is the sort of thought that went into saying that machines are not conducive to the greatest spiritual good. Right? So this is what he had to say on education. A modern education is more or less useless. An educated man is no more likely to lead a morally upright life than an uneducated man. A true education brings one in harmony with nature, teaches one to govern one's passions, makes the body a servant of the will, and leads one to the highest knowledge and produces people who enjoy their work. So that was his vision for a true education. So where does all that leave us today? So I don't think it offers a simple, straightforward prescription of what should be done, right? But we could look at the kind of lives that we lead today. We could examine what we believe and see if they are in conformity with the highest possible ethical standards. And if they are not, then we can probably change what we believe. And then we can examine what we practice and examine the gap between what we believe and what we practice, and try to bridge that gap as well as possible. So I think that would be the message that we can take from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, right from the first slide, I have a lot of questions, but I thought let me
Sure.
get the whole idea. And then
Yes.
I was very similar in my opinion with regard to this Dukkha Nivarti.
Yes.
Right? So Chitta Vritti Nirodhana is the base from which. But of late, when I started reading a little deep into Vedas, I found out that as much as we talk about Nivarti, we also talk about Vritti. So many of the yagas, yajnas are also about growth.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not very sure, because in the list that you gave, Jesus is the only person who is missing.
Exactly, he's not missing. He's there.
Is there?
He's there.
Okay, right. But only on the basis of the philosophy of Christianity, that all of us are sinners. In almost all the rest, life is not completely seen as a life of this thing. But when you see, Buddha says that there is, and it is up to you.
Yes.
You can escape if you want.
Yes.
But especially the rest of the Vedas and Upanishads, and doesn't talk that life is full of misery and things like that. We need to escape. With regard to this higher knowledge also, there are only few Upanishads which talk about, because the rest of the Vedanta is not talking about it in the other sense of this thing. So the real is all the more real. So, and these ideas of missionary and things like that, where we draw a line on technology, in the sense, even chakra is a technology,
yes,
in a way.
yes.
So where do we draw a line is another thing.
Yes.
So that is one more interesting part in that, this thing. And with regard to economics also, like he is talking about Swaraj and sustainability, but on the other hand, we are also talking about specialization, right? So how do we differentiate between this and that? And
what is that last part? I didn't follow. Specialization and what?
in the sense, like the whole idea of economics is that I do what I do best, and you do what you do best. Therefore, we both do our best. Now, if I do whatever you do, and you do both what I do and you do, naturally we are not at our best, right? So what happens is, in economics, the golden rule is that we all specialize, right? And he can be against standardization, but he cannot be against specialization, because he has talked about self-discipline and things like that. So he is for specialization in that sense. And there was one more. See, anti-technology, yes, against lawyers, against doctors and other things, it comes to the base. Any service should not be for money, right? And I see his hierarchy more like Sanatana Dharma than having no hierarchy. He doesn't mean all are equal. He means inequality from a different sense of the word, which was also criticized of him, actually, right? So some of the gist points, right? So
okay. So I'll try to address some of them, as I might not keep all of the questions in mind, so please remind me if I miss some. So I think the first objection is that you raised was dukkha. Yeah. So and also that should we be against growth?
No.
Yeah.
All life is not an escape from dukkha.
Right.
It can be so many other things, not
yes.
just escaping.
Yes, but the fact is that we all encounter dukkha. There is nobody who lives a life without dukkha at some point or the other.
We love dukkha.
We love dukkha, yes. We may love dukkha, yes. But the fact is that none of us escape dukkha. It does affect our life at some point or the other. Seems to be a universal understanding, and that we also desire, however imperfectly, to escape from this dukkha and to avoid this dukkha if possible. So in that sense, it's a central concern.
Which boils down to hedonism, right? See, it is more not only hedonism, right?
How does it border on hedonism?
Hedonism is
consumption
pleasure,
of
pleasure seeking and pain avoidance.
Well, you have to look at what is the way to avoid pain, right? For example, what Buddha prescribes is a way to avoid pain, but it's not he doesn't advocate a hedonistic lifestyle where he says just maximize your pleasure and worry about nothing else. He doesn't quite say that. So I don't think we are really saying that, advocating a hedonistic lifestyle. It just says that the natural human tendency is to avoid as much pain as we can, right? And what is the right way to seek that reduction in pain? So that's the way I understand it. So there may be deeper philosophical things there. So that was the first question, right? The second one was why that growth is a natural thing for human beings, right? And creation of wealth, definitely I don't think Gandhiji either said that creation of wealth is a bad thing, but he says that our life should not be driven solely by the objective of creating as much wealth as possible as quickly as possible. That he feels is wrong, right? So that's what is the, and with older traditional societies, you could not create large amounts of wealth quickly. Today you can assemble things very fast. You can produce 1 million computers very quickly, and an older civilization, even just 200 years ago, even 100 years ago, could not have done what we are doing today. So in that sense, mechanization has helped us. We can wipe out a whole forest in a month. A forest that has taken 1 million years to grow, we can wipe it out in a month, because we have the technology, we have what it needs. We can wipe out a city, right? Whereas the olden days, they could never do that. They can cause a lot of harm or good, but on the scale at which we are capable of today, they were not. So in that sense, Gandhiji does have a point in saying that, you know, we have to be very, very, very careful if we decide to embrace technology. There's an inherent risk that we overshoot and that we, yeah.
It's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
I once listened to one of the lectures by his grandson.
Yeah.
He, I don't know, maybe he made it humorously or sarcastically. He said, okay, why are we going to sustain our environment? You know, like we sustain it, and one day some meteor may come and crash. Right? Let us live through. No, come on. Right? So he also made that point. One, and two is, if we don't know the ultimate purpose, which Gandhi assumes to be moksha. Right.
Well,
even he doesn't know what happens after death. Right.
No,
assuming that.
He's only exploring, you know. I mean,
correct.
Nobody knows. So
Right.
at least we don't know unless we attain some
At
state
least,
of
correct.
thing. We don't know. So, but
So-
the question is alive. So he says the question is really the quest. I mean, as long as you hold that question as a sacred question and you really spend time with it, there's a possibility that we may find an answer. If we don't ask the question, there's no question of finding the answer.
That hypothetical position, we need not take a decision that we will not grow in this fashion, right? Let's clear our forest if we need, we know.
Yes.
And maybe eat tablets. It's okay, right? So maybe, right? So what I'm trying to do is question an hypothetical position. That's all, right?
Yeah. I mean, see, there are always imperatives for growth. I mean, you know, one cannot wholesale reject it and say that, you know, we are not going to have cities. We are all going to live in villages. That may not work out. We have already come very far in this game. You know, we're already. How do I go back? Which village will I go back to, and what will I do? You know, so it's probably not feasible in some sense. Yes.
See, I think there are many slides which talk about multiple things on education, on machinery, on use of many things, which really gave me an input that everybody need not be 100% correct. So Gandhi is also not 100% correct is what my inference is now. The reason why I am saying this is if you just see the human civilization or the entire world, the living beings, humans are the only creatures who can control the mammoth elephant or be it dinosaur, whatever it is, the mammoth thing or the minute thing like virus or bacteria which is not even visible. Humans are the only creatures who can control this. It is only because of two reasons. One is the sixth sense, the thinking ability, and the machinery which he uses. Starting from our old age, and he correctly pointed out, if he is against machinery, then he should be spinning the thread with his hands, not with the chakra or whatever it is. Right? That is also machinery.
Right.
Machinery at a larger scale.
No, people have pointed out to him also that the glasses you use is a piece of machinery. Right?
Exactly.
These feel you use, and he accepted.
So,
he was aware
when
of
he
it.
accepts it, it's a mistake. So what he defined about machinery is a mistake.
No, he didn't say that it's a mistake. He accepts that there may be a place for certain minimal machinery that is absolutely required for sustaining life.
That's what the minimal is
your and my definition.
exactly
right.
my definition, right? For you,
That's
I mean, for Gandhi, the machinery is only this
Yes.
much. For me, I need a big machinery.
Yes.
Somebody, I need only this phone.
Yes.
Somebody need a tablet.
Yes.
So it goes on. So
It
the
goes on.
definition
Yes.
is different for different people.
Yes.
And the reason why humans did not develop for a long time, for millions of years, is because of the mobility. Okay, they did not know how to, move around and all. And with mobility, we got more power. We are able to migrate from one place to another place. So, if he means railways, it means actually all the mobile
Modes of transport,
all
yeah.
modes of automobile
Yeah.
things. I completely disagree with that point, because without mobility we couldn't be here what we are doing right.
So
Everything,
Yeah.
not only for goods,
Yeah.
even for humans and everything. So, I just like to disagree with, there are many points which I have disagreement. At least I would like to point two
Record
points
this
which
one,
I could,
okay. Let me try to address this. So I'll just try to address this. I think actually it's a very interesting thing that he was against the railways and he was against these modern forms of transportation, aircrafts and things like that. And if I were to take the position that Gandhiji took, one can ask the question, what do we achieve by controlling the elephant or the bacteria or whatever, right? I might live longer, but what is the use of a life that is why would I want to survive? So that I can eat more, I can live more, and I want to live still more, and I want to live still more, I want to eat still more, right? So to him, such a life is useless. It's essentially trying to run away from death. We are all going to die, we know that. So why? So essentially his question is, don't worry about it too much. We're all going to die. Live as long as you live and then die. Don't go to a hospital. That's precisely what he said. So this is a very radical, a very bold statement, really. And that I'm not saying you should agree with it, but it is something that we have not thought about, in the sense that we have not looked at it as this thing and said, hey, there's a way of life, there's a tribal somewhere who has never seen a hospital. He is fine. He may live only for 30 years, but he lives a full life and then he dies. And it's possible that we could also choose to live that life, but that we don't choose is our, is our prerogative. I could choose to live the way I live, and that's fine. But this is something else that he's offering. And again, the same thing with mobility. Why do we want to travel far away? Where do we want to go? And what do we achieve by traveling far away? I mean, what do we acquire really? That can't be acquired in the same place, living in the same little house that I live in, where I was born. I could do that. That I choose not to do it, is that I exercise my freedom not to do it, but I could choose to do it. And I don't think one is a lesser life than the other. So that's the key thing. He says that the uneducated peasant is as well off as the king of England, or whatever, the queen of England, because you really can't compare, in a monetary sense. I mean, a guy with just one buffalo and a small field may be as happy as the king of England. So,
Last two questions. Can I just add to Dr. Parag what he said? One minute.
Sorry, can I just add what Parag said? Whatever you said, everything is correct. Only thing that those are raging boys are disagreeing just because, like say, if I disagree with what Gandhi said, probably there's a time gap, or else I am looking that thing, or I am judging that thing, or assessing that thing from my perspective.
Yes.
Now, coming back to our issue that you said, that Swaraj, that's the starting point. Just what he said, it is there in 2013, if you read the journal called Gandhi Mark, it's there in 2013 volume, and Critical Review Journal, that says publication. So if you find that what he said, Swaraj, it's like Panchayat Raj.
yes.
Swaraj is a self-control. People have understood self-control means I'm controlling my sense organs. That he never said that. He said Swaraj, it's a Sanskrit word. We need to remember that he is he's a believer of Sanatan Dharma. He knows there are four Purusartha: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Mukhya. He said that Artha and Kama I am not focusing. I am not bothering. It's a secondary. For me, the primary is Dharma and Mukhya. Now, coming to my friend's point that he raised, that Mukhya, whatever he said, he derived the notion from Buddhism. For him, Mukhya is of two types. One is Jivan Mukti, another is Vidya Mukti. What he said about all his work, in all his speech, you read Gandhi Mark. That's a, he just give comments to the readers. Reader asks question and this. From page number 115 onwards, he says that I am always referring to Jivan Mukti. What it means is that life is full of suffering. Nobody can deny that. And what kind of suffering? It's up to the individual. What I am telling you is that if at all you will be getting some sort of spirituality, probably you can refrain from that suffering. He never said that it's a physical pain, mental pain, nothing of that sort. So from that spirit, if you try to understand, then it is justified moksha. Absolutely no issue. Because if people say that after death we do not know, that you are aware of that. He said that I am not bothering of that. That is a Vedanta Upanishad, whatever they said that. Now coming to my friend's point of machinery and all this thing, in that time he said that we are not, we should not use the machinery because the self-sufficiency. Now if you see that, what happened, one person is producing so many things. See, in the earlier days, there are 5 people, 6 people were involved. They said that if one people will be doing through the machinery, other people will be unemployed. So their skills are not used properly. So in that context, he said machinery. But since we are looking from our perspective that machinery means maybe a table or a knot or a screw something, then we are misunderstanding it. Now this is my way of reading and understanding. And recently I published a paper on this Gandhi's Purusartha. I have clearly defined. For him, dharma has nothing to do with religion. Rather, dharma has something to do with duty, ethics, and religion where people should not believe in God. People should believe on the spirit. Like I can say that this is a God for me, it's a spirit for me, has nothing to do with God. It is we the human being having the limited knowledge. We speak a little vocabulary. So therefore we try to explain the God through our own language, through our own understanding. Therefore we will find out Muslim, Hindu, so and so forth. But if you examine all our ritual sacrifices, we are referring to one and only one person. And that he was precisely telling. So therefore for him, it's only one dharma. Dharma is that your own duty. That's what he is telling about Swaraj, that he has pointed out. Now it's my question is that, now coming to non-violence. On the one hand, Gandhi said that non-violence means I'm not hurting others.
Yes.
Whatever people will say, I'll tolerate. I'll develop the power of, that Plato's cardinal virtue I will develop so that I won't hurt others. I'm not really telling anything. I'm not even beating somebody, not manhandle, nothing. That's a self-defense. So that after some time that person will know that what is the point to, pushing that. On the other hand, he said that so many times, that if some animals is disturbing you, I'm just referring to biodiversity and all.
Yes.
If some animal is disturbing you, it's beyond your control.
Yes.
You have to somehow take care of that. Because he said that otherwise your life will be on threat.
Yes.
And he said that if somebody is coming a knife towards you and you know that the intention, you have all rights to protect yourself.
Yes.
Because whenever he told about Swaraj, self-control, self-sufficiency, duty, he has always related to the rights. Now on the one hand he said that I'm not going to hurt others. On the other hand he said that if somebody is coming forward to me and I could able to sense the intention, so it is the instinct for me that I can protect myself. In the process of protecting, that person may also get some injury. So where do you want to place him actually? What kind of non-violence he is preaching?
See, my understanding is probably not as extensive as yours. So I'll put it this way, he gives this example in this book in Swaraj where he talks about, what do I do if a thief enters my house, right? He says the thief can be anybody, it could be my son who may be here to steal something, and then I might pretend to be asleep because I really don't want to confront my son and then get into an argument with him. So I might let him take what he wants. Or I might find a big muscular guy and I think he's going to beat me up, there's no point getting into it, so let me pretend to be asleep. Right? Or it may be a skinny guy and I realize, hey, I can beat him up, so let me, go out there and beat him up. So the response will of course be tailored to what comes at you, right? The other thing is, my understanding of what Gandhi would do, he would respond to the situation. He doesn't say, his would be a passive resistance. He would really try not to hurt the other person or animal, but I'm sure he would find a way to convey this message that, I am not going to bow down to you. I am not going to be intimidated by your violence. You can beat me, you can beat my body, you can hurt it, but you can't intimidate the spirit. So that's the way I understand it. How he would actually do it in each situation, I don't know. So,
thanks, Parag. I think we
so
probably...
yeah.
Okay, quick question, because already you overshot the time.
Probably we are looking him at as a national leader. If we would have seen him as a saint, I think all these questions wouldn't have risen. If Buddha or Mahavira would have spoken like this, we would have
But that's the greatness of Gandhi, He lived in the slum of politics.
Exactly.
He lived in the slum of politics.
For me, he's a saint.
Yes.
Okay, so and all his thoughts are saintly thoughts from him.
They are, yeah.
I think if that is not there, I think we wouldn't have spoken.
Yeah. But of course, it's debatable if, Gandhi was at the same level as somebody like Buddha, because I don't think he was at that sort of I don't know, that's my limited understanding.
No, I think,
but
I think
we'll wind up.
Discussions because
one statement. John Paul has written a book, Gandhi and Swaraj, that in 2006 Cambridge publication. There he said that he self-proclaimed that I am not a saint. Because although I am preaching the concept that you can control sense organs, but so far I have not done that. I wouldn't do that because I am a human being. So therefore, whatever I can do that, but not that extent.
I think
I understood that Buddha is a politician.
Thanks for the interesting discussion. Thanks, Dr. Parag, for the excellent insights on Gandhi development. Thank you again.